Good afternoon. Welcome to the Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 7 newspaper articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express and discussing them. The handout for the same will be available in the description of this video for your kind perusal. Please have a look at that. The first article that we'll take up is related to the shipping sector, as the war in the West Asia has brought into focus India's shipping industry. India's share in the global shipbuilding is less than 1%, whereas India imports a large amount of its oil and natural gas needs through the shipping. Therefore, there is a need to expand the national fleet. The second article is related to textile exports, as the textile exports from India in fiscal year 2026 fell by more than 2%. Additionally, we'll take up 5 articles in the prelims pointers section which will be helpful for your prelims preparation. The first article is related to the shipping sector, as the war in West Asia has exposed the gaps in India's shipping sector, especially the shipbuilding industry. As India imports a large quantity of its oil and natural gas needs from the West Asian region, and that import happens through the shipping route, still India's share in the global shipbuilding is less than 1%, whereas China accounts for about 40% of the global shipbuilding. We build aircraft carriers, but our share in the commercial shipbuilding is very low. So we'll discuss the challenges faced by the shipping industry in India, separately the challenges faced by shipbuilding in India, and also the government initiatives taken up to promote the shipbuilding in India, and also the support for shipping sector in general in India. This is important in GS3 under the topic infrastructure. First, let us have an overview of the logistics. Why logistics is so important and shipping forms a part of that logistics chain. Logistics is important because of the macroeconomic factors, for example, economic growth. When an economy grows, then there is more sale and purchase of the products, goods in an economy. And the Indian economy is poised to grow by more than 6% by all estimates. And when the economy is growing, naturally there will be a need for more logistics, more transport. Therefore, India's cost of logistics is close to 9.5 trillion rupees. India handles about 4.6 billion tons of goods annually. Therefore, as the economy grows further, there will be an expansion of the logistics sector also. Additionally, we are focusing upon the manufacturing. The government wants the manufacturing base in India to grow through schemes like PLI, Production Linked Incentive Scheme, Make in India, etc. We want to make India a manufacturing hub. Whether you take the defense sector, the semiconductors, even space, etc. Therefore, as the industrial base grows, simultaneously the logistics needs will also rise. Similarly, there is an urbanization trend. For example, it is projected that by 2030 itself, India's urban population will account for about 42%. And also, there are certain usage-specific factors which will push the need for logistics in India. For example, the surge in the e-commerce. Now we don't even want to go to buy our daily essentials. They are also delivered to our homes using the quick delivery apps, for example, Blinkit, Zepto, etc. And there is a manufacturing diversification also. For example, various companies which have bases across the globe, they also want to make India another base for their manufacturing, because they want to follow the China plus one strategy, so that in the times of geopolitical tensions, they have an additional manufacturing base in India also. That will again drive the need for logistics. Similarly, there are last mile deliveries which are increasing. For example, various shipping channels, various cargo and transport companies, etc. And there are various innovations which are happening which will also drive the logistics sector. For example, the AI integration in logistics, that is to ease the congestion, to optimize the traffic routes for the goods trafficking usage, etc. Even the increasing EV penetration, the usage of electric vehicles in the transport fleet as well. And if we observe India's performance in the Logistics Performance Index, we are still lagging as per the World Bank's Logistics Performance Index. As of 2023, we were ranked at 38th place. So what are the initiatives taken by the government for supporting the logistics industry in India? First, India's budgetary allocation for the capital expenditure has been increasing continuously, and a significant part of it is going towards the logistics expansion, the investments for the rail, road, air connectivity, the multimodal connectivity, etc. And there is the investments in the form of dedicated freight corridors, the investments along the Delhi-Mumbai corridor, the establishment of multimodal logistics parks to ensure that there is integrated connectivity, rail, road, and air, the establishment of various portals, for example, Parivahan portal, which includes the Sarthi, that is for the driving license processes, the Vahan for the vehicle registrations, etc. Similarly, the introduction of the e-way bills, that is to increase the logistics efficiency. For example, an electronic documentation is done for the truckloads which have a valuation of more than 50,000, so that there are no paperworks, there is ease in the interstate transports, etc. Similarly, the Gati Shakti, the Prime Minister's Gati Shakti plan, that is again to ensure multimodal connectivity and to ensure the timely project completions. And as an overarching framework, the National Logistics Policy, the national logistics policy aiming to bring down the logistics cost in India, because it is quite high. As a percentage of GDP, the logistics itself in India accounts for about 13 to 14% of India's GDP, whereas the global average is around 8%. 8 to 9%, and the national logistics policy aims to bring down the logistics cost in India as a percentage of the India's GDP to 8%, the global average, by 2030. And for that there are various initiatives, for example, the integration of digital systems across platforms and the unified logistics interface platform, etc. Another program, the logistics efficiency enhancement program, that is again to increase the freight efficiency, bring down the cost, ultimately lead to employment generation, economic growth, and also the logistics efficiency. Now coming to the shipping industry in particular, which is also part of the logistics, let us look at some data first. We have an aspiration that we want to become one of the top 5 nations in shipbuilding globally by 2047. Our current share in shipbuilding is less than 1% of the global shipbuilding, which is very less as compared to China, which accounts for a huge share. Similarly, in terms of the carrying capacity also, that is by deadweight tonnage, China accounts for a huge share, whereas India lags behind a lot of other countries. When we look at the share of various states in India in terms of the number of ports that they have, the leaders are Maharashtra and Gujarat. Both Maharashtra and Gujarat have 48 minor ports each. There are 2 major ports also in Maharashtra and 1 in Gujarat, whereas Tamil Nadu has 3 major ports. When we look at the type of cargo which is handled by the ports in India, the maximum cargo is petroleum and petroleum products, followed by coal, followed by container traffic, and then iron ore. The share of the maritime sector as a percentage of India's GDP is just about 4%. We want to increase it to 12%. Similarly, the share of the Indian seafarers as a percentage of the global workforce in the shipping sector is just around 12%. We want to increase it to 25%. In terms of the cargo handling by the ports, out of the 15 busiest cargo ports across the globe, 7 are in China, whereas there are just 2 Indian ports among the top 30 busiest cargo ports of the world. That is Mundra and JNPT. They are in the top 30. They are also at places 27, 28 approximately. Similarly, the turnaround time in India for the container traffic, it is pretty low although. That is, within less than a day, the unloading happens and then the loading of the freight happens on the container and it leaves the port. The turnaround time in India is less than 1 day, and it is very good as compared to USA, where it is 1.5 days, and in Australia, where it is 1.7 days. Similarly, the container dwell time, that is the time that on an average a container spends on the port while it is berthed at a terminal, that is just around 3 days in India as compared to UAE, where it is 4 days, and USA, where it is 7 days. So these 2 parameters are good and in favor of India in terms of the shipping sector performance. Now, what are the challenges in the shipping sector? One of the primary challenges is the underutilization of the inland waterways and the coastal shipping. We have the river length of more than 14,500 kilometers, which is navigable, but there is underutilization of the inland waterways. Although India has now put in efforts to increase the inland vessels traffic, and India has also coordinated with the other countries also. For example, India, Bangladesh have a river transportation protocol across more than 2,300 kilometers of the length of Ganga, Brahmaputra and their tributaries. But the utilization in general as compared to the advanced economies remains low. Similarly, there is lack of technological integration. For example, artificial intelligence that can be used for managing the congestion at the ports to reduce the times and also for the security considerations and for coordination in general. But the implementation of AI needs finances where they fall short. Similarly, there are challenges with respect to the regulations and sustainability and decarbonization. For example, the smaller shipping companies, when they are violating the pollution norms, hefty fines are imposed upon them, which affects their financial viability. Similarly, there is competition from the other foreign players also. For example, the other foreign players from Japan and South Korea, they have mega shipbuilding clusters. Therefore, they do not need to source the major components from the other countries. Whereas the Indian shipbuilders, the commercial shipbuilders, they have to import various components, for example, marine gas turbines, gearboxes, etc., and which increases the cost of shipbuilding in India. Already the commercial shipbuilding sector, it is having low margins because of high competition globally. Therefore, if the commercial ships are built in India, the cost rises up. Therefore, the cargo needs, the transport needs, they are usually fulfilled by the foreign vessels which are purchased rather than building them domestically in India. Similarly, there are concerns related to the berthing of the ultra large and large vessel sizes. The ultra large vessels, they are not able to berth on the Indian ports, a large number of Indian ports, because of the lack of depth in the draft. Because of the shallow draft on the ports, the ultra large vessels, they need to take the services of lightering. Lightering means the cargo that they are carrying, that is first transported onto smaller vessels, then those smaller vessels bring that cargo onto the port where it is unloaded. Therefore, the berthing issues is there for the large vessels. Similarly, there are geopolitical factors also. For example, the tensions in West Asia, the war in West Asia, which leads to the lack of availability of oil and natural gas, which pushes the fuel prices further, increasing the cost for the logistics, cost for the freight industry. Now, there are challenges specifically for shipbuilding in India also. For example, one of the foremost challenges that in the global shipbuilding market, India's share is pretty low, which leads to the lack of the auxiliary services also, availability of the auxiliary components, and therefore they have to be imported from the other countries, increasing the cost. Plus, the shipbuilding sector, it is capital intensive. High capital investments are needed initially, and then there are technological gaps plus competition from the other shipbuilders, that is China, South Korea and Japan. And there is need for further research and development investment, especially for ensuring green shipping, because India has climate change targets also, and also the investments are needed from the private sector also, which will come if there are definite long-term government policies which are implemented for supporting the shipbuilding. Similarly, the production costs in general, they are 15 to 20% costlier than South Korea and China. Therefore, we build the large aircraft carriers in India like INS Vikrant, but we are not able to build the commercial ships in India, because when it comes to national security, aircraft carriers, even if they become expensive, they will have to be built indigenously to ensure that India is not dependent upon the other countries for its defense and national security needs. Whereas when it comes to commercial shipping, then the ships can be bought from the other countries also, or they can be leased on contracts. Similarly, there are challenges with respect to infrastructure. For example, we don't have mega shipyards, dry docks or modern port facilities. Therefore, the challenges remain with respect to the technological advancements and their implementation in the shipbuilding. Now, what are the initiatives for promoting shipbuilding in India? The government came up with the National Shipbuilding Mission. This is a strategic mission which gives a long-term push for the domestic shipbuilding in India. Specifically for providing financial assistance, there is the Shipbuilding Finance Assistance Scheme. Under this, up to 100% capital support is provided for the creation of internal infrastructure for the greenfield shipbuilding clusters. Here the capital support is provided through a special purpose vehicle in which the support is shared between the center and the states in a 50-50 ratio. Similarly, up to 25% capital support is provided even for the expansion and modernization of the brownfield shipyards as well. And there was the proposal to create an India Ship Technology Center under the Finance Assistance Scheme to ensure that there is the research and development for the shipbuilding technologies in India and also the skills development for the skills needed for shipbuilding domestically. Additionally, there is the creation of Maritime Development Fund of $3 billion, which can provide for up to 45% of the shipbuilding and repair. Also, there is a ship breaking credit note scheme also, to incentivize the recycling of ships in India and also to promote the sustainability. At the same time, there are specific subsidies also provided, that is up to 30% for building the non-conventional ships, green ships in India. Up to 30% of their cost is provided in the form of an upfront subsidy by the government. Also, FDI is allowed in the shipbuilding. 100% FDI is allowed under the automatic route. To increase the port capacity, for expanding the port capacity, $82 billion investment plan was given by the government to invest this by 2035. Additionally, there is the Maritime Amrit Kal Vision 2047, which also seeks to invest 80 lakh crore, up to 80 lakh crore investment opportunities there for the next 23 years. And it aims to create 4 port clusters with capacity of more than 300 million tons per annum and 2 port clusters with capacity of 500 million tons per annum. And it also seeks to set up transshipment hubs at Vizhinjam and Galathia Bay with a 20-meter deep drafts so that the large and ultra large vessels can also be berthed there. And it targets to increase India's share of the transshipment cargo to 95% by 2047 from the current around 32%, and to enhance the modal share of coastal shipping and inland waterway transport from 100 million tons per annum in fiscal year 2022 to around 500 million tons per annum by fiscal year 2047. Let us have a look at the other initiatives for the shipping industry as a whole by the government. There is the Sagarmala program, which has certain pillars to promote the port-led modernization, coastal community development, coastal shipping and inland water transport, port modernization, and also to promote the port connectivity. Additionally, there is the Jal Marg Vikas project implemented through the Inland Waterways Authority of India, that is to promote the roll-on, roll-off services in India, ferry services in India, and to ensure that the inland water transport, the inland vessels, they are promoted. Also, India participates in the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, although it is now on the back burner because of the geopolitical tensions and the war in the West Asian region. Plus, there is the Inland Vessels Bill 2021. That is to ensure that there is the registration of the inland vessels to ensure their safety and security, and also to ensure that they are following the pollution norms, the emission norms, the inland vessels in India. Plus, there is the Maritime India Vision 2030 as well, which seeks to develop best-in-class port infrastructure in India to drive the end-to-end logistics efficiency and cost competitiveness, and also to ensure there is adoption of technology and innovation to strengthen the policy and institutional frameworks, and to enhance India's share in the global shipbuilding, and to increase the cargo movement through the inland waterways to promote the ocean, coastal and river tourism, river cruise sector, and to enhance India's global stature as well as maritime cooperation with the other countries, and thereby leading the world in safe maritime transport and sustainable and green maritime sector, therefore becoming the top seafaring nation with world-class education and research and training as well. Now, coming to the article, there is a structural issue in how India imports its cargo. When the goods are imported into India from the other countries, there will be logistics cost also. And the logistics cost will have to be ultimately borne by the buyer. There are two ways in which this logistics can be arranged. Either the buyer pays the seller the complete amount, the cost of the product also, plus the logistics cost also, and the insurance cost also, the total money to the seller, and the seller will arrange for the logistics as well. This we call as the CIF model, the cost, insurance and freight. The total money is paid to the seller will in turn hire any shipping company or talk to a ship owner and send that goods or cargo to India. The other model is where the buyer has the control over the logistics. The buyer pays the seller only the price of the product that he has purchased. In turn, the logistics will have to be arranged by the buyer himself. This we call as the free on board model, where the buyer has the control over the logistics. Earlier in the policy, we used to support the free on board contracts so that the buyers have the control over the logistics. Since the buyers are Indians, therefore they are likely to enter into a contract with the Indian shipping companies, Indian ship owners, therefore supporting the domestic fleet growth as well. But of late, the policy preferences have rather shifted towards CIF. This is a matter of concern because this will have significant financial implications. Because if the entire money is to be paid to the seller is a foreign seller, he will demand the payment in US dollars rather than the payment in Indian rupees, which can be given for the logistics cost if an Indian ship owner is hired for the logistics. Now, about half of India's crude oil imports are on the free on board terms, and about 40% of LPG is carried by Indian flagged carriers. But when we look at the fertilizers such as urea, they are almost entirely imported under the CIF contracts. Therefore, there the import is dependent upon the foreign vessels. And during such crisis, such cargo is among the first to face the delays. Therefore, India should aim to carry at least 50% of its strategic commodities, energy and food on its own ships. Therefore, support the domestic fleet. Now, there is a mains practice question also. Despite its strategic importance to trade, India's shipping industry remains underdeveloped. Analyze the current status, structural challenges of India's shipping sector. Discuss the government initiatives to transform it into a globally competitive industry. Please try to write it. The next article is related to the textile exports from India. The context behind it is that the textile exports from India have fallen by more than 2% in fiscal year 2026. This is a cause of concern because it has been a significant forex earner for India, plus the textile sector, it is a large employment provider in India. Therefore, we'll look at some data related to the textile sector, the challenges that the textile sector faces, and the government initiatives taken up to support the textile sector in India. This is important in GS3 under the topic Indian economy and issues related to planning, mobilization of resources, growth, development, and employment. First, let us look at some data related to the textile sector in India. India accounts for about 4% of the global trade in textiles and apparels. The textile sector accounts for 2% of India's GDP, which is significant. And the compounded annual growth rate of the textile sector over the past few years has been north of 25%, around 28%. And the textile export share in the overall exports has also been in the double digits in the past, around 11%, but now it has been falling. Plus, it is a significant employment provider, a large employment provider providing employment to about 45 million people in India. And also the exports from India as of fiscal year 2021-2022 were about $45 billion. And in terms of specific productions, we are the second largest producer of silk in India, and 95% of all hand-woven cloth is from India. And it is also a symbol of our cultural heritage as well as identity, because there are traditional textile techniques that have been developed over centuries, and also designs and motifs which are also a marker of India's cultural identity as well. Now, what are the challenges faced by the textile sector in India? One of the primary challenges is that of the competition from the other countries. For example, if you observe the market share of India in the textile sector globally, in 2014 it was about 5.9%. This came down to less than 5% by 2020. At the same time, there is underutilization of the textile capacity in India. We have a large number of small textile units operating in India, for example, handlooms, heirlooms, etc. And they are operating at just about 70% of their capacity because of the poor demand for exports of the textiles. Similarly, there are credit constraints which are faced especially by the small textile units. We don't have a few large textile companies in India, rather there are a large number of small textile units, and as per some reports, almost half of them are not able to access the credit through formal channels. Also, there is poor technological deployment because of again the scale, because of the poor economy of scale which is utilized because of the presence of the large number of small textile units. There is poor technological deployment as there is a decentralized nature and there are low levels of automation therefore. Plus the price competitiveness of the other countries that also hurts the Indian units because there is the availability of cheaper man-made fibers. There are cheap imports of the man-made fibers from the other countries, and they also face the compliance costs because of the GST as well, and the spinning mills especially, they are coming under the unorganized nature. Plus the procurement of the local cotton, that also becomes expensive, and there is a shortage of skilled workers as well, the workers for the design of textiles and also for the production of the technical textiles. And the textile sector, that is environmentally degrading because of the need for water, energy as well as various chemicals which are used, for example, in the dyeing of the textiles. Another challenge is that of the changing market trends. As the trends change, the consumer preferences also change. Therefore, the small textile units, they can't remain dependent upon certain export markets or even the domestic consumers also, because their preferences keep on changing. Therefore, they need to keep on updating their product catalogs, changing their capital intensive machinery also. Now, what are the government initiatives for promoting the textile sector in India? The government came up with the Samarth scheme, the scheme for capacity building in the textile sector, that is to ensure adequate skill development for the textiles in India. There is the TUFS scheme and the amended TUFS scheme, that is the amended technology upgradation fund scheme, through which funds are provided, the credit linked capital investment subsidy is provided. That is, if a textile unit is purchasing any benchmarked machinery, then the funds are provided, the capital investment subsidy is provided by the government so that they can employ better technologies. Additionally, there is the National Technical Textile Mission to promote technical textiles in India, and there is the production linked incentive scheme also for the textile sector, the PLI scheme, to promote the production of the man-made fiber apparels, the man-made fiber fabrics and also technical textiles, and even to attract the investment in India to make India further a global hub for manufacturing of the textiles and technical textiles. Plus there is a PM Mitra scheme for setting up of the 7 PM mega integrated textile region and apparel parks with the world-class infrastructure, and the scheme for integrated textile parks, that is to set up the infrastructure facilities for setting up of the textile units, and also the integrated processing development scheme, that is to meet the environmental standards and support new common effluent treatment plants so that the growth of the technical textiles and the textiles in India happens sustainably. Also, there is the I Care Jute initiative, that is to provide certified seeds at discounted prices to promote the jute in India, and also the retting technologies. Retting means in the presence of water or moisture, the non-fibrous part of the jute is allowed to rot, ultimately to soften the jute fiber and under the water restrictive conditions as well. Now, what are the suggestions that we can give for promoting the textile sector further in India? First, we need to promote innovation because the demand changes every day. Therefore, we need to set up more design centers, set up more incubation facilities for the small textile units, and also provide platforms for collaboration. This is where the government can come in. It can create platforms for collaboration between the designers plus the manufacturers. Also, we can diversify our exports, both in terms of products as well as in terms of destination. Like, we cannot remain dependent upon only the advanced economies or certain regions, for example, Europe or USA for our exports. We need to explore more export markets. Similarly, we should develop the clusters for the textile sector as well, that will further promote the establishment of the other auxiliary industries and also ensure the environmental compliance with the international standards, to ensure that even the manufacturing in the textile sector, it is environmentally sustainable. And we can provide the trade policy support also. For example, we can abolish the anti-dumping duty on PTA. PTA is a critical input for the man-made textile fiber and yarns, etc. Now coming to the article, the country's textile and garment exports, it has fallen by more than 2% in 2025-2026 due to the contraction in the shipments of key segments such as cotton. And the declining pattern is visible across major segments which were exported from India, that is the decline in the cotton textiles export, ready-made garments as well as carpets. Only the handicrafts grew slightly by 1.5% during the fiscal. Now there is a mains practice question also. Examine the challenges confronting India's textile sector, discuss the government initiatives for the same and suggest measures to enhance its growth and global competitiveness. Please try to write it. The next article is related to the Chabahar port. As India had earlier secured a sanctions waiver from the US regarding the import of the Iranian oil, now that sanctions waiver is going to end, there won't be any extension. This is important in prelims under the topic current events of national and international importance. First, let us discuss a few facts regarding the Chabahar port. The Chabahar port is strategically located in the Gulf of Oman and it is near the Kandla port in India in Gujarat. This is strategically important for us because through the Chabahar port, through the utilization of this multimodal route, we can get connectivity to Jahedan, even utilize the Jaran-Delaram highway and get connectivity towards Kabul as well. So this is a deep water port in the Sistan-Balochistan province and it is near the Gulf of Oman. It is the only Iranian port with direct access to the Indian Ocean, and there are two port terminals here, the Shahid Beheshti port terminal and the Shahid Kalantri port terminal. It lies on the transit center on the international north-south transport corridor. The north-south transport corridor, it is a multimodal transportation route, and if it is activated, then the cargo cost, the logistics cost and the logistics time will also come down for India's logistics towards the region, and therefore it has a strategic influence and also critical for the regional stability. But currently Iran itself is in a war with US and Israel, and it is also located near Gujarat, near the Kandla port in Gujarat, as the Kandla port is just about 550 nautical miles away from the Chabahar port. And we entered into the Chabahar project long back. It was a tripartite agreement with Iran and Afghanistan to develop the Shahid Beheshti terminal. It was India's first foreign port project, and also it involved the construction of a rail line from Chabahar port to Zahedan. The motive was also to bypass Pakistan and therefore access Afghanistan without needing Pakistan, and also to access Central Asian region, therefore like an alternative route to the traditional Silk Road. But there are challenges with respect to the Chabahar port. For example, there was earlier the US risk of sanctions from which we got a waiver, but now that waiver may not be extended any further and it is going to come to an end. Also, there were the Houthi disruptions in the Red Sea. The Houthi rebels, they were attacking the commercial ships in the Red Sea, therefore increasing the logistics cost, the freight cost in the region. And there were security concerns with respect to Afghanistan also, because the US exited from Afghanistan. Subsequently, there was the capture of power by the Taliban in Afghanistan. Now, although we are building ties with the current regime in Afghanistan as well, and there were regional tensions which further exacerbated due to the current US-Israel war with Iran as well. And there were competition also from the similar projects and also from China, as the Chinese investments in the Chabahar that are way larger than India, as the Chinese investments are closer to $50 billion. Now coming to the article, the US sanctions for the Iran's Chabahar port waiver will end on Sunday. The government now faces a test of the strategic autonomy. Either we will have to exit the 23-year-old port project, or we will have to face the American sanctions. Now, since October 2025, the Washington had extended the waiver for 6 months until April 26. Now that is going to end. Since November 2025, the government has withdrawn all its personnel from the Chabahar, and we have prepaid our investment commitment of $120 million, and now considering transferring our stake in the Shahid Beheshti terminal at Chabahar to an Iranian company, so that we have an option of returning at a later date if we get a waiver of sanctions from the US. And in enlisting a local partner, India is not exiting a strategic project.
We are merely safeguarding India's interests on a project of tremendous long-term importance. India's other regional infrastructure, for example, the investments through the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor, that is also unlikely to bear fruit soon, given the fractures within the Gulf countries, enhancing the importance of Chabahar. Therefore, in 2018, the US had agreed to carve out an exception for India to utilize the Chabahar route for sending food and aid to Afghanistan. But subsequently, the US changed policy and it mounted pressure on India to curtail our ties with Iran, including the oil imports, trade, as well as the investment in the Chabahar port. In 2019, the US even introduced sanctions on India also to curb the steel trade as well. It disrupted India's plans to provide the rolling stock, coaches, track, switching, signaling equipment also after several delays. Therefore, Iran subsequently dropped India from the railway project. The next article is related to the rules governing international waters. This is important in prelims under the topic current events of national and international importance. Let us first observe what was the status of the Strait of Hormuz before the war between Iran and US-Israel broke out. Before the war, approximately 100 vessels transited the Strait of Hormuz every day, and just a day after the war, only a handful of vessels transited the Strait of Hormuz. As Iran started imposing a toll fee reportedly, as per some media reports, Iran imposed more than $1 million fee per ship transiting the Strait of Hormuz, although India was one of the biggest beneficiaries of the Iranian system, because Iran allowed 10 Indian flagged ships to pass and even allowed many foreign flagged ships also to pass, which were carrying the oil and natural gas supplies which were meant to be sent to India. And India reportedly said that there were no toll fees which were paid by India, and also it was just exercising the freedom of navigation given to the merchant ships in the region, and hundreds of Iranian vessels also crossed. But what did the US do after that? Iran demanded that it should have the right to regulate, the right to control the passage of the ships through the Strait of Hormuz, and the right to charge a toll. But the peace talks, they collapsed on April 12. Thereby, the president of US, Trump, announced the blockade of the Iranian ships. This blockade was initially less of a physical blockade using the naval ships, using the US Navy. Rather, it was more of a declaration of control that they were declaring using the radios. The aim of the US blockade was to dismantle the Iranian system to control the Strait of Hormuz and to deter the Iranian ships to pass the Strait of Hormuz. Therefore, dozens of Iranian ships also turned back after the so-called US blockade. But subsequently, the blockade turned tougher, as on April 19 and 20, US intercepted and boarded container ship Tuska that was Iranian owned and managed, which is a large cargo capacity vessel of having more than 60,000 tons capacity, and US even suspected that this cargo was meant for usage for military purposes in Iran. Then it subsequently even intercepted Tiffany, that is also a very large crude carrier carrying 2 million barrels of oil capacity between Sri Lanka and Indonesia in the international waters, as it was alleged that it is involved in the Iranian oil trade. What was the reaction of Iran to it? April 16, Trump observed that the strait is fully open, but there is a US blockade, and therefore dozen India flagged ships and foreign ships also, which were bound for India, they lined up for transiting through the Strait of Hormuz. But the IRGC Navy, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, it fired on 2 Indian flagged ships, Sanmar Herald and Juggernaut. India lodged a protest against this with the Iranian ambassador. And on April 23rd, Iran in turn also retaliated by capturing Francisca and another ship, 2 container ships it captured as retaliation against the US blockade and capture. And it observed that the capture is because of the endangerment of the maritime security by operating without necessary permits and tampering with the navigation systems by these container vessels. Also, Iran even fired at Euphoria. It had an Indian crew, but this is reportedly not in the Iranian custody. And Iran said that unless the US blockade is lifted, the strait cannot be reopened for traffic. Now let us observe the legal position with respect to such blockades. How are these to be interpreted? How these interceptions are legal or illegal? These straits, they are usually used as leverage during the war times by the belligerent parties. And there are various treaties and agreements signed, especially in the 20th century, for the naturally forming states such as the Strait of Hormuz. And subsequently, the UN clause, the United Nations Convention on the Law of Seas, it was negotiated for almost 2 decades and it came into force in 1994. The core principle which is universally accepted is that the seas, they are a shared global common and therefore they must be collectively managed, and the freedom of navigation should be allowed. There should be minimal exceptions, especially for the merchant ships, so that the global trade is promoted. And the high seas, they are not in the jurisdiction of any single nation. They are outside the jurisdiction of any single nation. But the US sanctions on various government agencies or various companies of those countries with which it is having a war, this is like a form of economic warfare that it resorts to. For example, it restricts the access to the funds, therefore the business transactions become difficult, and also it is based on the laws of US, not the international laws. Also, they have not been authorized by the United Nations also. And they even intercept the ships which are trading in Venezuelan oil, carrying the oil to Cuba, etc., therefore trying to control the oil market globally. And there should be certain exceptions to the freedom of navigation also, as per the legal principles. For example, hot pursuit of vessels should be allowed if those vessels have committed a crime in the territorial waters of a country, or there is an explicit authorization by the United Nations Security Council, or there are vessels operating without any nationality, committing any illegal activities or flags, or the outside high seas, for example, the territorial waters, within that, innocent passage rights also should be allowed to the merchant ships as well. These are the legal positions with respect to the interceptions. Now, Iran is claiming the right to control the Strait of Hormuz. Does it have any rights over the Strait of Hormuz? The Strait of Hormuz, it is an international passage. At the narrowest point, the territorial waters of Iran and Oman intersect. So there are no high seas or exclusive economic zones there. So what will be the interpretation as per the United Nations Convention on the Law of Seas? Here the concept of freedom of navigation in the high seas will not apply. Rather, the concept of transit will apply, which recognizes free unhindered passage to the foreign ships. Therefore, Iran cannot regulate the ship traffic, although here it is the territorial waters, nor it can deny the permission to the merchant ships which are seeking to transit. Although certain restrictions can be placed. For example, the ships must move continuously and without delay. The ships have to move along the designated traffic routes which were revised by Iran, and the ships must enter solely for the purpose of transiting, not for staying there, and there should be no loading or unloading the goods in the region in violation of the laws of Iran or Oman, whose territorial waters are there. Now, what can happen next? There can be a solution as proposed by the International Maritime Organization. It has proposed a plan for the evacuation of ships while upholding the freedom of navigation. The International Maritime Organization, although has decried any tolls or permits, that there should be no imposition of any fees, tolls or permit system for transiting the Strait of Hormuz, and the IMO Council has passed a resolution condemning Iran for attacks on the commercial vessels. But the IMO Council has not been critical of the US blockade. The next article is related to coal gasification, which is needed for mitigating the fertilizer crunch in India. This is important in prelims under the topic economic and social development. Before coming to the article, let's discuss a few basics regarding coal gasification. Coal gasification is a thermochemical process to convert coal into syngas. Syngas is a synthetic gas which comprises of various elements including the carbon monoxide, hydrogen, carbon dioxide, methane and water vapor. How is it produced? By ensuring that the coal reacts at high temperature from 1000 to 1400 degrees Celsius with a controlled amount of oxygen and steam. How is it done? The process includes first the preparation. That is, the coal is first finely crushed to increase the surface area of the coal. Then it is fed into a gasification reactor. That is the powdered coal. It is fed into the gasification reactor along with limited oxygen or air and steam. And the chemical reactions take place through which the coal breaks down into syngas components due to partial oxidation. And this syngas is raw syngas. It has to be cleaned. Then the gas cleaning happens. Therefore, the impurities like tar, sulfur and dust are removed from it to get pure syngas. Now, to promote the coal gasification, the government came up with the Coal Gasification Incentive Scheme. This was approved in 2024 and it promotes the coal gasification and lignite gasification projects for the PSUs, the public sector as well as for the private sector. Therefore, incentivizing the private sector participation also for the coal gasification in India. It has an aim to ensure that there is 100 million tons of coal gasification by 2030. As we have abundant domestic coal reserves, therefore we can utilize it to ensure sustainable industrial development. What is the significance of coal gasification incentive scheme? It will reduce the environmental impact, therefore also ensure energy security for India and even promote economic growth by also promoting the infrastructure development as well as innovation. It has three categories of projects. The coal gasification incentive scheme, under this the category 1 involves the PSU led projects, that is government sector projects, and the category 2 involves the private and PSU projects, and the category 3 involves the demonstration and small scale projects. Now coming to the article, we have a pressure on the supplies of urea and fertilizers because of the tensions in the West Asian region. Therefore, we can mitigate this shortage of the fertilizers by utilizing the coal gasification. But the coal gasification targets, they still seem distant because it involves the conversion of coal into syngas, the synthetic gas, which can further be used to produce downstream products like methanol, ammonium nitrate, synthetic natural gas and fertilizers as well. And the coal gasification projects, but they are capital intensive and it has therefore constrained the private sector participation. This is especially in the absence of assured long-term offtake or the price support mechanism. These support mechanisms have to be announced by the government for the private sector to participate in the coal gasification. The next article is related to POCSO, the Protection of Children Against Sexual Offences Act. This is important in prelims under the topic Indian Polity and Governance. So what is POCSO? The Protection of Children Against the Sexual Offences Act. It's a law which was enforced in 2012. It's a gender neutral law. That is, it protects both boys and girls provided that they are below 18 years of age. It protects them against the sexual offences. A range of sexual activities are covered under the law, that is, for example, showing them pornography, sexual assault, sexual harassment, covering even the non-penetrative offences as well apart from the penetrative offences. And the law provides that the punishment will be severe if the protector himself is the perpetrator. For example, if the accused is a relative of the child or a person in authority, then the punishment will be even more severe because the accused was supposed to be the protector, not the perpetrator of the offense. The law provides for the mandatory reporting of all the incidents of sexual abuse of the minors to the nearest police station by the citizens, and the child-friendly procedures will be adopted during the trial to reduce the trauma for the victim. Now, what makes POCSO so comprehensive? The law provides that the identity of the victim shall be remained confidential. And if the identity is kept confidential, then it reduces the trauma for the victim, the lifelong trauma. And the burden of proof as per POCSO is shifted towards the accused. Under section 29 of the POCSO, the burden of proof that he is not guilty lies upon the accused. In the usual course, the philosophy of the Indian criminal jurisprudence is based upon the principle that we treat the accused also innocent until proven guilty. But in this case, it reverses, and the burden of proof that he is not guilty lies upon the accused under section 29 of POCSO, and it is a gender neutral law and there is no time limit for reporting the offense. The reporting of the offense, the sexual offense against children, can be done after any period of time of the offense, of the committing of the offense. Also, there are certain safeguards provided to the victims, for example, ensuring that the justice system is child friendly, like the victim does not see the accused at the time of testifying so that he does not get scared, and the trial happens in camera. The evidence of a child is recorded within 30 days of taking the cognizance by the court, ensuring a speedy trial. Also, therefore, ensuring complete of the trial within 1 year from the date of cognizance. And special courts are set up for hearing of the POCSO cases. And the child protection, it is treated as a collective responsibility. Additionally, the Law Commission of India in the 22nd report had observed that the government should not reduce the age of consent, as it may have a direct and negative bearing on the fight against the child marriage, as there were debates at that time that the age of consent may be reduced. For example, if there is a marriage happening below 18 years of age, then the accused should not be treated as a perpetrator of sexual offense against the child bride, and therefore it will have a negative bearing on the fight against child trafficking as well, as per the Law Commission of India report. And therefore it even observed that rather the courts may be advised to tread with caution even in cases related to adolescent love where the criminal intention may be missing. Otherwise, it may amount to a tacit approval to the children in the 16 to 18 age bracket to enter into such acts, and therefore we need to safeguard the best interest of the child rather. The next article is related to NITI Aayog. This is important in prelims under the topic Indian polity and governance. The NITI Aayog is a premier policy think tank of India. It was established by a cabinet resolution in 2015. Replacing the erstwhile Planning Commission. Therefore, it has been established through an executive decision, not through a constitutional amendment or even the enactment of a law by the parliament. Therefore, it is not a constitutional body, it is also not a statutory body. It has been established only through an executive decision. It has twin mandates, that is to oversee the adoption, the implementation and the monitoring of the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And it also has the role to promote the competitive and cooperative federalism. Now, it comprises of a chairperson who is the Prime Minister of India. It has the Governing Council. The Governing Council comprises of the Prime Minister, who functions as the head of the Governing Council, and it also includes the Chief Ministers of all the states and also the Chief Ministers of all the union territories which have a legislature. For the union territories without legislature, their LGs are included, and it comprises of maximum 4 union ministers who are part of the Governing Council nominated by the Prime Minister, and it also has a vice chairperson appointed by the Prime Minister, and it may have the special invitees who are the domain experts who are nominated by the Prime Minister. Regional councils can also be set up for specific durations to address particular regional issues which are affecting more than one state, and the regional councils are convened by the Prime Minister and comprised of the chief ministers and the LGs of that region. It also has a CEO who is appointed by the Prime Minister for a fixed tenure, and he holds the rank of the Secretary to the Government of India. Now, what are the objectives of NITI Aayog? To foster the cooperative federalism and ensure active involvement of the states, formulation of plans at the village level and the aggregation of those plans at the higher levels, paying special attention to the sections at risk of not benefiting adequately from the economic progress, the formation of economic policy that incorporates national security interests, providing feedback for constant innovative improvements, and partnering with other national and international think tanks, creating a knowledge, innovation and entrepreneurial support system, and providing for a platform for resolution of intersectoral and interdepartmental issues, as well as focusing on technology upgradation and capacity building. Thank you.